my spiel out of the way. So Dunhams moved here in 1819. They start building this house in 1824. The height of the Tavern days is 1830s to 40s. And then I'm going to move my anachronistic water bottle out of the way. That's embarrassing. And so, so the stagecoach route was why the Tavern. And then the stagecoach traffic died down because the railroads came, which drastically changed transportation. So that's another part of the story here. And the Dunhams were also kind of ready to retire. So they decided no more operating Tavern. This was a private home then for a while before it was a museum. But the Tavern is just the one section over here to the west that you'll see. The rest of this is the private rooms of the family. So it was both family home and the business operating here together. This is called the keeping room. So it's large, it's busy. This is probably the heart of the home. This is Mrs. Dunham particularly, would probably be here. Starting first thing in the morning to start this fire to get the coals hot enough to be cooking dinner later on in the day. So big, large hearth. This is kind of like having burners on your stove. You have a pot crane if you want to turn up your burner, or you can scoop some coals out of the fire and drop them over here on the hearth, and then place a pot on a trivet over that to keep something just warming. Areas for food prep. They would have probably grown a lot of their own food and maybe had some chickens, but they also could go to the butcher if they needed to. They could go to a market to get some things. So a mixture of self-sufficient and then also being near a large city. So it's funny, you can go to the end of the driveway and see downtown from here, but at the times that the Dunhams are here, this is not even the city of Cleveland. It was East Cleveland Township, and this was heavily forested, swampy in some places, and felt way out there in comparison to down here in Cleveland.
Okay. Did the guests eat here, or was there a place?
No, there's a place to eat and prep everything from start to finish in the Tavern. Now, if it was slow, I doubt Jane would have been over there like, she would have been like, no, just come sit down with the family. There's a communal place to eat, and they would have just all had a meal in here. And they also probably had some long-term boarders who might have eaten with the family.
The size of the family?
They have 3 children, Loretta, Caroline, and a son, Charles. The line did not last long. The Dunham family, they all died out by the 50s or so. So, like, we haven't found any relatives. And Loretta's family, she lived nearby. She married a man named Robert Peer, and there is a little more family history we've traced there. Actually, I forgot that our bicentennial is coming up in 2024. So, do you want to hear my juicy gossip? We've been doing more research on the family, kind of really trying to dive in to pull out more narrative, more story. We know that Rufus had a child back in Mansfield, Massachusetts, before he married Jane and moved here with another woman who died in childbirth. And then he married Jane and they come here and they start a family. We found out she did not die. She had his child, was fine, and somewhere there's a marriage like recorded and then someone crossed it out or erased it, like whatever is more dramatic, to indicate like, not only is this off, we're going to pretend it never even happened, and he just skedaddled. And so maybe that's why they set out for the, to go settle out west, because of, I don't know, some drama.
All of the stuff here, is this from when it was a tavern? Or is this stuff that's period that you located?
It's period. So these are not objects that belong to the Dunhams. This building has changed hands since the family lived here. There was some restoration work that had to happen to turn this back into a place that feels like that 1830s and 40s time. So yes, all this is appropriate stuff. It just didn't come from the Dunhams, and there's a couple exceptions to that rule that I'll show you. This is the parlor. This obviously feels very different than the last room, which is sort of your hustle and bustle everyday household. This is where you're coming to sit in your Sunday best and chat with your family. Maybe someone's playing the piano for entertainment, or you're catching up on your correspondence, whatever it may be. This room is a little odd in its design. It's a more Federalist 18th century style room. The piano works. It is horribly out of tune though, but I plan to change that. Not personally, but, so the idea behind this is that sometimes you think of your good furniture being a few generations older than you, like it's your hand-me-down heirloom pieces. I do not think the Dunhams would have dragged any of this from Massachusetts all the way to Ohio.
No, as his first wife kept it.
Probably. Or they were in a hurry. But one of the founders of the museum thought there wasn't a good room of this, an example of a room of this type rather, in Cleveland at the time, and so she wanted one, and now that's what we have. So, and this is the room where in the 1930s it was rented out to the Cleveland printmakers. They had this is a little gallery showroom exhibit space. So that's another cool part of the history of this building. Yeah, for our bicentennial, I want to move all this furniture out. I want to have a printmaking workshop in here with Zygo and display prints on the wall. Maybe I don't move the piano. I had this idea today and I was like, oh. So somebody asked me about, did these objects belong to the Dunhams? No. I also like to point out, or answer rather, is this building original? And the answer is, like, it's a total hodgepodge. So all of the wainscoting in here is original. This is a reconstructed mantel. The flooring in here is not original to this building, but it is super old and was pulled out of another old house. And then in the tap room next door, that's the original 1820s ash floors. So it's a kind of amalgamation everywhere you go. This is the ladies' parlor, the sitting room. This is the space where Mrs. Dunham could have received women and children, or maybe the older folks. The next room we'll go into is the tap room, that's the tavern part, where the ladies probably would not have kept company with the men. So there is a hole cut out in the wall over here, with the bar on the other side, and then the bartender would have passed through the window for the ladies to have their drinks, which feels very old-fashioned and silly. So I just told myself that the ladies didn't want to hang out in there with the men. They would rather just have the peace and quiet of the sitting there. What we call the tap room, or essentially this is the tavern part of Dunham Tavern Museum. So it has a separate entrance. It has a back entrance as well. We imagine the stables were probably off this part of the building. Up above the bar, hanging on the wall, is what is called a coachman's horn. The stagecoach driver would have blown the horn. I'm trying, you guys can get cozy in here. Would have blown that horn to signal like, hey, I'm coming, stoke the fire, put the kettle on. This is mostly a place where the stagecoach drivers would spend the night. So we're on the Buffalo, Cleveland, Detroit Post Road. They would have done this route probably back and forth. If you're the passenger in Cleveland, your destination, then you're going to get out and go wherever it is that you're ultimately going to. But the drivers needed a place to rest their horses for the night and get themselves a meal and a bed. So behind the bar is a staircase that goes to the room directly above us, and that's where the sleeping quarters were. There could have been a door, an actual door in that doorway that locks, so that keeps the tavern operations separate from the private rooms of the family and kind of its own self-contained business. Also to that end, we have another hearth, just like we saw in the keeping room, a slightly smaller version, but still the ability to, prepare a meal from start to finish in here, a place for communal dining to sit down, and for travelers to relax and just kind of hang out a little bit. Also, the same way that we think of a tavern or a bar today, this is a place to come and socialize, stop on your way home from work, catch up with your neighbors. They had political meetings here, they had social gatherings and turkey shoots, all kinds of stuff. So it was definitely a central gathering place in the community.